Apparently there is no research evidence showing us the difference between the male and the female brain.
Yeah.
Are there any differences?
Well, the first thing to say is, as the great storyteller Michael Mead said, whenever you talk about gender, you get trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have noticed.
Yeah. And you're always going to step on somebody's hallowed ground. Mm. Yeah. So the first question to ask yourself in this, then, what's the big hallowed ground in the culture at the moment? And in the culture, the big hallowed ground currently is postmodernism.
Mm. That's the hallowed ground at the moment, yeah.
And postmodernism has been an essential thing which has unpacked the power dynamics between men and women. Mm. And in the roles between men and women, men have had clearly an advantage in terms of their power status over centuries.
Yep.
In most societies, and certainly in all post-industrial societies. That's clear. Mm. So you've got to appreciate postmodernism for doing this. But postmodernism is only talking about things that come out of human consciousness. And a role is, a power role, dynamic, is how a human being decides how to organize their society. That comes out of the human mind. So it's driven by the brain. Mm. The mind and the brain are not the same, but it's driven by the brain. Yeah. So what they've, and they've done that to a large extent in order to take care of inequalities in society. So at the same time as they've been unpacking the power dynamics between men and women, they've been pushing for gay rights and for sexualities on the margin. Mm. And the current, what they say in postmodernism, they say, there is no such thing as gender, there's just narratives of gender. Mm-hmm. And I'm afraid, whilst it partly is true, it's also partly garbage, because it forgets one thing, and that is human beings live an embodied life. And in the embodied life, we have to deal with the bodies. Mm. And human beings are sexual beings. Mm. And they have bodies which are different in the most basic and primary respect. And the difference between the sexes or the genders, postmodernism says you have to say sexes rather than genders. They're very strict on words.
Okay.
Yeah, a bit like Humpty Dumpty,
yeah,
who said, I'll tell you what a word means. When I use a word, it's exactly what I say it is. This is postmodernism. So there's one word which they never talk about, unfortunately, and that word is genitals.
Yeah. It's like that's something that disturbs the picture, the idea that we're all the same.
Exactly. Mm. And being as it's very difficult to talk about genitals anyway, because they're meant to be private, below the belt, postmodernism has just completely jumped it. So what we know is that men and women are different physically at the level of their genitals in order to procreate.
Yes.
Because we're sexual beings. Yeah? And so all human beings are going to be born by the coming together of that difference. Mm-hmm. Even if you don't know the father, even if there's something happens in the test tube, it's masculine and feminine, or male and female elements that come together and transform and create a child. Mm. So that's at our absolute root of who we are. Mm. And we have no trouble with gender when it comes to going to public toilets. Even the postmodernists know which toilet they should go to. Mm. There's no question for them.
Even though the unisex toilets have been more and more popular.
Where do they have those? In Norway?
Not that often, I think.
Well, Norway is a very good society for having flattened out the gender issues. Mm. But still people are confused.
Yes.
What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? Mm. They've gone for social equality, which is great. Mm. And try to, you know, knock this glass ceiling everyone talks about. But equality is not the same as sameness.
No.
And people easily make that difference. make that, you know, make that mistake.
So maybe that's the reason why it's such a touchy subject.
That's the reason it's such a touchy subject, because we have had to create societies that are more equal.
Yeah.
But at the expense of knowing what difference is. And I must tell you, our bodies will not have it.
No.
Our bodies will not have it. And our brains, let's get back to your original question, our brains are there to serve our bodies. It's not the other way around. We didn't get a body because we had a brain.
No, we got a brain because we
had a body and we were evolving. And our bodies are evolving, our brains are evolving, the species are evolving, and our consciousness is evolving. And now at this time, it's time to really tackle this whole subject of gender and what it means. So they've done all this research on the brain, and as far as I'm concerned, I think the jury is out.
Okay. Yeah, there is no clear answer on that one.
There's no clear answer. I think for me what is clear, what everybody knows, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist, everybody knows that men and women seem to behave differently out of a different way of seeing the world. So they have a different imagination, I think.
Yeah.
And then the question is, where does that come from?
Yeah. That was my next question, actually. Is this biology, is this environment, or is it genes?
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge question. And so the first answer is, back to postmodernism, you're right, postmodernism. All the things that I think about myself come in from the images I've taken in. All my images of masculinity come in because I've seen how my father behaves, I've seen how men behave on the TV, you know, I've learned about who men should be at school, I've taken in basic propositions like big boys don't cry, and this all affects me. Yeah?
As a grown-up it does.
Hugely.
Yes.
So part of psychological work is unpacking that and understanding that. Yeah? But I see and feel about the world more like you do in some ways than I do with my wife. So ideally, why don't we live together? Yeah? We probably get on better in the flat because we know we kind of have similar ways of imagining things, whereas my wife and I have opposite ways of imagining things. That's clear. Everybody knows this. This is common sense, common experience. Where does that come from? Now, if I put the third element back in, I don't want to live with you because we've got the same genitals. I want to live with someone who's got different genitals because I know what fun that can be when it starts to flow, or how creative that is. So then we're left with this imagination problem.
Yeah.
So I think it's safe to say women have women and women have different imaginations, and that causes a lot of impasse in relationship. And it has a possibility of transforming the other, because if you spend the effort getting to know how does a woman see the world, and the woman takes the effort to say how does the man see the world, and become compassionate and adjust, you can have a very creative relationship, I think.
It's all about being curious about the other.
That's it.
Okay.
One of the answers to this, why men and women seem to have different relationship, has to do with the fact that men were born to mothers and women were born to mothers. So it's biological again. And what does that mean growing up? Men with difference and women with sameness. And
how does that affect us?
How does that affect us? And I think that affects us very deeply at the level of imagination. So I'm always needing to go away, if you're a woman, from you to find something similar. Whereas if we're both women, I feel something similar, but I have to get out to find my individuality. So those are the things I think we can say more about. Whereas, you know, the brain stuff, we'll see.
We will.
Yeah.
the jewel will come in at some point. Probably.
I mean, there are things like, they say men are more visually focused in the front of the cortex, and women more focused on the meaning of relating things. Yeah, this seems to be right. But whether the brain adapts out of the function or vice, we still don't know any of that stuff. We're still at the beginnings. But what we do know, if men and women become curious with each other, they can extend their range. They can go from their base default situation and go and do what we call the alchemy step, and become integrate more of the other. And I think that's the harmony that we're trying to evolve towards.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.